Who is Carrie? Chapter 9, Part 3 of Chapter 9. It didn't matter anyway, for I was stuck there now. It was mighty close, and the sweat was beginning to come out on my forehead and trickle down my cheeks. And dark. I couldn't see nothing at all. But since I had gone to so much trouble, I figured I'd better make it worthwhile, so I pushed the door open just the tiniest crack, no more'n the width of a quill pen, and put my eye to it. It gave me just a little slice of a view a couple of inches wide right up close, but fanning out to 3 or 4 feet across the room. Oh, scared as I was, it was a pretty sight. All them setting at the table dressed up so fine, the men in their knee breeches and waistcoats, the women in their long dresses and shawls. They was all colors of the rainbow, with embroidery and mother-of-pearl buttons and silver buckles shining everywhere. I never seen nothing like it. And which one was Dr. Johnson? The way the door was angled, I could see about 1/4 of President Washington from the side. I could see his nose, his forehead, one eye, part of an ear, and a piece of his stomach where it stuck out against the table. Sometimes he swayed back and disappeared except for his foot and his nose. Waiters was always going to and fro, cutting him off from view, but then the view would open up a little, and there he'd be, or at least parts of him anyway. The trouble was hearing what they were saying. The people was all talking at a great rate, showing how big they was and what they was going to do about the olive pie situation, and it was pretty hard to make out any single thing. But sometimes somebody would ask George Washington a question, and the people nearby would shut up to hear what he said. One thing they was talking about was the notes, which they sometimes called bonds, which I guess was the same thing. And it was clear enough that it wasn't just poor soldiers like Dan's daddy who got stuck with him. The rich had got stuck too. A lot of them had sold beef and hay and apples and cloth and shoes and all kinds of things to the army. It was the patriotic thing to do, and there was money in it too, which is always good for patriotism. And now they was stuck, just like the soldiers. It was a good sign, I reckon, for if the rich was stuck too, they was more likely to push Congress to pay off the notes than if only the poor was stuck. But still, nobody seemed sure that Congress would do it. Some said the bonds would go up, and some said they would go down, and some said they wouldn't do neither, but would stay right where they were. And I was wondering all of this and hoping somebody would say, "What do you think of it, Dr. Johnson?" But instead, somebody said, "What time do you suppose it be? We don't want to miss the theater." It made me uneasy. I tried to make out who had said it, but I couldn't tell. The next voice said, "It's just 5 o'clock." That can't possibly be right. No, it can't, can it? Why, bless me, the clock stopped. Well, my blood froze, and I gasped so loud I was scared everybody in the room could hear it, but they didn't, and I stood there praying that they was too polite to go messing around with a clock in the middle of President Washington's dinner party. Odd that it should have stopped just when everybody came in, the voice said. Might have stopped last week as far as it goes. Yes, you're right. Still, feeling sort of trembly, I give out a soft little sigh and begun on a new prayer that they was too polite to tell the President of the United States that his clock was broke. It wasn't none of their business anyway. Maybe President Washington liked to have his clock behind, so there'd be more time in the day and he could get more work out of the servants, or some such. Just as I was thinking that, I saw a man lean across the table to George Washington, let me repeat that. Just as I was thinking that, I saw a man lean across the table to George Washington, or at least up to his nose and chin. He had a lot of gray hair and brown eyes, and he was smiling. He said something to the president, and the president swiveled around so he was face on to me. He was staring direct at the clock, and I knew he would be mighty surprised to know that the clock was staring back at him. And I got going on a third prayer, which was that he figured he wouldn't want to mess with no broken clock during one of his dinner parties. He'd wait until the guests had all gone home, which any sensible person would do. I had got about that far in my prayer when George Washington smiled, got up, and started to walk toward the clock, with the other man coming along beside him, and a lot of others watching to see what was going on. The sweat was cascading off me now. My heart was racing, and my legs so weak it was all I could do to keep from sitting straight down. I pulled the little door shut and tried to find some way to grip it, to hold it tight, so they'd think it was locked, but there was nothing to grip it with. I heard the president say, "Dr. Johnson, that clock has always been my favorite. It doesn't lose as much as a minute a day." I near dropped dead. Dr. Johnson said, "Perhaps a mouse has built a nest in the works." Then the door swung open and the light came flooding in, and there was me and the President of the United States staring at each other face to face.